Hello everybody, thank you very much for joining me this evening. It could be morning your time, night time or afternoon, so thank you very much wherever you are in the world. My name's Shane, aka Storm Security, aka Shell Droppers on Instagram. Today's video I'm going to touch upon a previous video I uploaded there last week, and that's in relation to the cyber kill chain, also known as the intrusion kill chain. I'm going to go into a little bit further detail into this and provide some kind of demographics for you to be able to kind of visualize this in a way that you can kind of understand and, take away some information that you might not already have come across. If you're coming across this video and you are a security professional like myself, thank you very much for joining. It's a pleasure to have you click on my video, and I hope that this serves as a reminder to you, if not anything else. So without any further ado, let's get started. So I'm just going to open up here my pictures. So I have a demographic here for you, and what we're going to do here is we're just going to go through each stage of the cyber kill chain. So at the very first stage there, we've got reconnaissance. So reconnaissance is the research, identification, and the selection of targets. So typically, an active adversary would be researching the organization or company or business that they're going to attack. This can be done by way of open source intelligence gathering. They might navigate to your website, get an understanding of what your business is, what you do. Are you in the healthcare sector? Are you in the financial services sector? Are you aerospace and defense, etc., etc.? So that's kind of reconnaissance in terms of open source intelligence gathering. Now what we've got is identification and selection of targets. So the identification and selection of targets could be anything like, for example, they've gone to your website, they're now kind of looking at a way of, well, how can they kind of penetrate you? So they might be looking at any vulnerabilities on the website. They might go to the contact tab of that website and they might get an email address for that contact, which could be used for, say, phishing exercises, etc., etc. And then, of course, we're going to move on now to the weaponization, or stage 2, which is intrusion. So this would typically be, they're going to pair remote access malware with an exploit into a deliverable payload. For example, an Adobe PDF, Microsoft Office files, could be Excel documents. We all know that Excel documents contain macros. If they're able to weaponize an Excel document in such a way that the macro check isn't actually performed, then what can happen is code can actually be ran on opening a malicious attachment containing a malicious macro. Now this macro could be anything from, once it's landed on the machine, it could send back the IP address of the machine that it's landed on. And this is where kind of you go back to maybe the reconnaissance stage as well. Once an active adversary has an IP address of a machine that's, say, on an internal network in the environment, well, what they can typically do is kind of start scanning that IP address, looking for vulnerabilities, looking for open ports that shouldn't be open. A big port right now that people need to be kind of wary of is port 3389, which is RDP. Port 3389 RDP is probably right up there in the top 3 ports that are misused by cyber attackers, because a lot of the time RDP is literally, it's sat open. It's almost as though it's your front door to your house that's left wide open. Anybody walking past that sees that kind of front door that's open could simply walk in it. So a bit of security advice there would be to, if you don't need RDP services open on a machine, close it down. If you do need it open, maybe you've got an RDS or an RDP server that does remote desktop services, remote desktop protocol kind of stuff in your environment for a specific reason, because there are legitimate reasons why you would have an RDP server, and RDP services running in the environment, just to make sure that you've got really good, strong authentication. You've got really good, strong firewalls that are able to stand up and detect, and you've got an EDR product there that can kind of give you some more information that, should anyone be kind of probing away at your network, that you're able to identify and be able to contain and then neutralize that threat kind of right early on in the cyber kill chain there. Which, at that stage there, if you're able to kind of kick them out, you're able to put an IP address block in place before they start, kind of doing some real nasty stuff on the internal network, then hey, that's a win, right? Okay, cool. Let's move on then. So now we've got the exploitation phase, which could be, also the delivery phase as well. So they've delivered malware to you. They're looking for someone to kind of click that link. They're looking for someone to open up their XLS file. They're looking for someone to do something silly, be tired. Could be a knackered system admin. He's been working all day. He's been doing a physical server install in a data center. He gets an email. It seems legitimate. He's at the end of his day. All he wants to do is go home, answer that one last email, or maybe click that file for download, and he can take that laptop right and take it home. And have a look later on. Happens all the time. So now we're in the kind of exploitation phase. So if we have a look at this is once delivered, the weapons code is triggered. So he's clicked on that link, he's downloaded that XLS file, and he's opened that XLS file. The code or the macro that's contained in that, there was a check bypass. Malicious code is now executed. So if you've not got a good antivirus product with some EDR stuff, which is the endpoint detection and response, a lot of stuff now is XDR, which is extended detection and response. That kind of EDR, XDR functionality there will really give you some really great insights should something be triggered and detected, and you'll be able to kind of figure out where did it come from, what file was involved in it, was there any process startups involved in it, did it do anything to obtain persistence on the target, methods of obtaining persistence on the target, as some of you security professionals will know. One of the big ones there is scheduled tasks, right? So every time you boot up your machine, the machine goes, okay, check, boots the machine. First thing it does, I've got any scheduled tasks to do. If they've put, I don't know, a weaponized interpreter reverse shell in there, that connects back to the attacker, hey, boom, as soon as you go online, or as soon as that machine comes online, the attacker there is going to have a ping basically on his side. It's going to go, hey, this machine's up, what do you want to do? Do you want to launch some commands at it, etc. Depending on the level of access they've got, they might only have user system privileges, which is kind of really what, at this stage here, you're going to hope they only have user privileges, and you've got good antivirus product locally on the endpoint or the server. You've got a good firewall, and you've got some EDR or kind of XDR functionality that's going to really assist an incident responder to be able to go in and go, hey, you downloaded this file from this website, or you downloaded this file from this email here, and it's triggered, it's fired, it's executed. Basically what you've done is you've detonated malware. And they kind of go in there, they can kind of clean that up, they can kind of look for other indicators of compromise, etc., from the SHA-256 hash. Moving on there, because I don't want to get too into this. I know some of you viewers there might not be security professionals, so I don't want to kind of use too much terminology there that might confuse you, and that's okay. If you have any questions, please feel free to add a comment, send me a message, and if you want to know more, hey, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. All right, cool. So let's move on. So they in the exploitation phase, they're actually looking to exploit a vulnerability in an application or a system. So you're talking Eternal Blue vulnerability. You're talking probably out of date Microsoft Office applications. I think one of the earliest versions of Office that I saw in a customer's environment of ours that we support here was, I think it was Office 2003. Now, as you can imagine, that product came out in 2003. It's long unsupported. You only have to go and, fire up your Brave browser, do a DuckDuckGo search, type in Microsoft end of support for Office 2003, and it will tell you it was probably end of life back in, I don't know, 2012. You might even get lucky with extended support. It could have been 2015. So they're looking to exploit a vulnerable application. If you're running vulnerable applications in your environment there, you might want to kind of start looking at that. You might want to go and do a security review. You might want to do reach out to maybe a third-party security company and get a vulnerability assessment completed in your environment. If you've got an internal team that can do this, hey, even better. And then once you've done a vulnerability assessment, you might want to go ahead and take that next step and get a penetration test done in your environment. And what the penetration test does that the vulnerability assessment doesn't do is actually go one step further. So with detected vulnerabilities in your environment, are those vulnerabilities actually exploitable? If they're exploitable, then you've got a problem that you might want to start closing that door. Okay, so listen, we'll move on. So now we're going to kind of look into privilege escalation here. So, like I said there, slightly earlier on, is they've got it on their machine. They've probably only got user level access. They don't have administrator, or with Linux and Mac environments that would be known as root. So they've only got some level of access over the system, so they can't really do any kind of further damage that would require administrator privileges. You might have UAC enabled, which is user access control. So user access control, you've probably seen it on your own machines. It's where, like, if you download something from the internet and then you go to run it, you get a little pop-up box going, hey, are you sure you want to do this? Then yes or no. If you're not an administrator and you've got user level privileges and it's locked down pretty tight, then typically it's going to ask you for a password. Now, if you're just a user, you're probably not going to have that password. You're probably going to have to reach out to your internal IT team to be able to reach your system administrator to ask them for the password. And of course, the system administrator that's at that stage there should, if he's security conscious, should kind of be asking questions. Hang on a second, where this file came from. What do you want to do with this file? Is this part of your role-based access control? Like, if you are someone that simply sits in an office, churns out some Word documents, maybe churns out some emails, maybe you're in the marketing team that wouldn't really download an executable and run it, then usually that should be the first level of block that comes into place. If you are someone that does download executables, you might be a developer. You might be writing code. You might need to download an executable for testing purposes. Then the system administrator will go, hey, well, as part of your role-based access control, you should be able to download and execute executable files or batch files or any kind of files that do something. When I say executable, I mean it does something. It changes the configuration of your machine, or it may open one application that needs another application to open to be able to send data from one application to another as part of your duties. So that's what I mean by kind of an executable. So we'll go ahead here and just kind of touch on privilege escalation again there, just kind of bring that back. So at this point now, the attacker's got user access. He needs to get administrator access, or he needs to get root access. What he would typically be doing is trying to escalate his privileges so he can get that extra step up that ladder that it effectively removes certain barriers for him to be able to kind of do some real nasty stuff and do some kind of damage, as an administrator. Full access to the network, full access to the endpoint, full access to the server and any tools that run on these machines. A lot of the time that you will see a privilege escalation attempt as part of an active attack, and you will also see it a lot on a penetration test as well. It's once you get system, that's almost a golden ticket for a hacker. So next we're going to be looking at kind of lateral movement. So at this point now, let's come at this from worst case scenario. All right, he's done the recon, he's done the initial access, he's done the exploitation of a vulnerable application or a vulnerable operating system. He's escalated his privileges up to administrator, domain administrator. So he's now able to add accounts. He's now able to download, install, run anything he wants without being challenged. Well, once he's got on that machine, he's going to start kind of wanting to look elsewhere. How else can I embed myself into this environment to further compromise and obtain my objectives? So he's going to be kind of looking at, SQL servers. He's going to be looking at RDS servers. He's going to be looking for backups. He's going to be looking for any other information or proprietary information that may be stored on a different server, and then pivot, which is an offensive security term. In this term, we're going to talk defensive. So he's going to move laterally towards another target, and then he's going to start the intrusion, exploitation, privilege escalation stage again, and then start to compromise more and more systems. Now, from lateral movement, let's just again go back to worst case scenario. All right, it's penetrated your environment. Your entire environment is now compromised. He's going to start doing the kind of rollback step now. He's going to start obfuscating his techniques. He's going to start doing kind of anti-forensic analysis. So he could start, overwriting data, for example. A lot of security professionals, may have come across this, especially digital forensic and incident response engineers, where they've overwritten the hard drive more than 7 times. And when you overwrite a hard drive, or let me just kind of take a step back, if you fill up a hard drive and then wipe a hard drive, and then you fill up a hard drive and wipe a hard drive in iterations of 8 times or more, then what happens is that all of the actions and everything that he's done initially have been overwritten and erased so many times that it actually makes kind of forensic jobs harder for the DFIR teams, because they're unable to get to the kind of juicy content and the logging that they require to actually be able to kind of go, hey, this is what he was doing on this machine, here are the timestamps, here is the initial access, here are the steps that he's taken. They would have none of that information. Now, look, every DFIR knows that there are anti-forensic tools out there. I'm not going to be naming names on this video. That might come in a later video. But, just to kind of make sure that, again, that before the attacker even gets to this stage, you want to be running some industry grade level antivirus, EDR, XDR products. You want to have an industry grade firewall on there, before they even get here. So, all right, let's move on. So we're going to go here, and we're going to go on to denial of service. Now, this is not going to be in every case of a cyber attack, but just to kind of cover it here, denial of service is typically an offensive action. So denial of service could include deployment of ransomware, because if ransomware is able to execute and deploy across the environment, then ransomware effectively encrypts and holds your files to ransom, typically for a payment in cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, Now, a lot of the time here, you know, um, you're never going to get your files back. You might, pay the ransom. Typically, the ransom demands that I see is in the tens of thousands. The bigger the impact, the bigger the company or the organization. Think the National Health Service. Um, you know, the demand for a Bitcoin payment to get your files back is going to be in the tens of millions. Um, and even at that stage there is actually no guarantee that they're ever going to give you a decryption key. There's also no guarantee that a decryption key even exists. That system may be that far encrypted that at this stage now you might want to be thinking about, disaster recovery, backups. Do you have backups? Re-imaging some machines. And of course, with that, every DFIR knows that there has to be a very, very careful process of ripping machines off the network, re-imaging machines, introducing machines back onto the network during an active cyber attack. So yeah, there's a lot to think about there. Stage 8 on the cyber kill chain there is exfiltration of information. Again, some cyber attackers are not interested in the information that you have. Some cyber attackers are. There are certain ransomware groups out there. I'm not going to name names, but what they typically do is they extract and exfiltrate all of the data that you have on these systems just prior to the encryption stage of ransomware. So what effectively happens here is you actually get hit with a double whammy. You get hit with a data breach under the GDPR or the General Data Protection Regulations, and you also get hit with the crippling damage of a ransomware attack. So not only do you have to deal with the threats of having to pay money out for a potentially unavailable decryption key, but you also have the added kind of ransom of if you don't pay us to decrypt your files, then we're going to leak the information. So you see where you can kind of get hit in two places there by some of these cyber attackers. So, look, listen, this is a very basic overview. If you have any questions, please do feel free to reach out to us, put a comment there, put a like, whatever. And I can imagine a lot of you are going to have questions. So if I don't get back to you straight away, please understand that, I do work full time. I'm a new father, but I will get to you as soon as I can. Well, guys, girls, thank you very much for your time listening to me today. I understand that it is a bit of a long video. I do hope that you've enjoyed this and you do have some kind of key takeaways from this. Have a fantastic day, and thank you again. We will see you in the next video where we will go on about some of the incident response procedures that DFIR guys can take. All right, thanks guys, see you next time.